I'm really pleased to introduce you to the panelists who are here from Change Ready Solutions today. We've got Alvin, Bruce, and Natalie. I'm going to tell you all a little bit about them before we get started. So first of all, Bruce is the founder and president of Change Ready Solutions. He's an accomplished business transformation leader. He helps businesses transform their internal business practices, as well as their client-facing practices. And he's been a professor at NYU SCPS and the Baruch School of Management. I'm also very pleased to introduce you to Natalie. Natalie has been a distinguished leader for over 20 years, providing consulting and services on the subject of organizational transformation and innovation in a business context. She's worked with Fortune 500 companies, nonprofits, and she helps them to build these productive, diverse, and healthy employee cultures that help to drive some of those innovative practices. She is also currently the president and founder of Possibility Designer, which is providing services to enable businesses to more effectively innovate, solve complex business problems, and leverage diversity. And then finally, of course, I'm happy to introduce you to Alvin Lee. He is both an executive consultant with Change Ready Solutions, as well as an executive advisor to the firm on all things diversity related. He has worked in a number of world-class organizations, both in the private sector as well as in higher education. He has held roles such as Senior Director for Training and Development at Merrill Lynch and Senior Vice President at Lee Hecht Harrison. That's where he was responsible for diversity initiatives along with his consultant training. So he has joined the ranks of academia at Purdue University and has recently moved to Rose Human Institute as the Director of Human Resources. And with those introductions out of the way, I'll just tell you a little bit about how we're going to spend the rest of our agenda. So first, we're going to start off by talking about some of the challenges that we all face in the innovation space. Then we're going to move into how diversity and innovative thinking are related. And we'll talk about some of the different types of diversity, introduce the DEI formula, and talk about what that means for our culture in terms of inclusive interchange and 3 actions you can take immediately after you finish this webinar. And a reminder, of course, that we'll be sticking around afterwards for Q&A if you're all interested. So without further ado, let's take it away by starting by asking you guys all a question. So when you're thinking about your organization, you're going to see a poll pop up here. So I just want all of you to tell me, you can check as many as apply here. Does your organization face any of these innovation challenges? Is it about knowing which are the right problems to solve or the best opportunities to pursue? Is it about obstacles that are not driving innovative thinking down to the business unit, lack of sufficient leadership involvement, problems with implementation, execution, difficulty producing measurable results, or is it just that you don't have enough ideas or new thinking anyways? Oh my goodness. And we've got tons of responses coming in, lots of people participating. Alvin, Bruce, Natalie, you're seeing these results as well, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, great. Over half of us have voted. And it's interesting, it's like you can see it fluctuating, but I feel like there are some clear problems that people share when it comes to innovation at their organization.
Yeah, I think it's what's coming in right now is showing there's a lot, right? There's a lot of challenges. We knew these were some top ones.
It's got almost 75%, and I'm going to share the results so now everybody can see what the winners are. Winners.
So thank you, Jessica, for doing that. This is some interesting findings. So the first thing that's interesting is that number 1 is knowing the right problems to solve or the best opportunities to pursue. That's a significant challenge for those of us who are innovation leaders, or problem solvers, design thinkers. So that's a good start. And a very close second is implementation challenges. Right? It's the greatest insight is of little value if it's not implemented effectively. So that's great. And even the lowest level item, lack of sufficient leadership involvement, at least a third of us, right, selected that. So this shows that these challenges are they're shared, B, that they're significant, right? And so the next question is what I'm going to end the poll. So the next question really is, well, what do we have to look forward to moving forward? Because this is what we're experiencing today. So we have some predictions that we're making. Well, one of those predictions is that instead of things getting simpler over time, for innovation managers, for continuous improvement problem solvers, right? For all the people who are involved in looking for creative solutions to business challenges, our business will not get more simple. We predict that it's going to get more complex. And look at 2020 if you need any example of that. Also, when we look at the frequency of new challenges that will be incoming for us, we also believe that it's not going to slow down, even if we would have liked it to, but rather the frequency of new challenges will increase. And so given this, really, there's a need for saying, what are some of the new solutions we can look to solve the challenges of innovation and problem solving? So let's take a look at something that is one avenue to explore in terms of new solutions. So on one side of the screen, you should see Team A. Team A, they're all of the same gender. They're relatively the same age. They're relatively physically fit, same body shapes, right? Though you might know it, they come from similar backgrounds. Some of them even went to the same schools. So that's Team A. And then here on the other side, we have Team B. It's different, right? Team B has different genders, different gender identities, people of greater range of age, right? Different body shapes, different physical capabilities. And those little brains you see are indicative of the fact that there are a couple of people in this team who think very differently than everyone else does. And so the question that we have for you is, how do these teams compare in their potential for innovative thinking? So if you could use the chat, and you can refer to Team A or Team B when describing it. And let's just take a couple of quick minutes on what's your thought about how these teams compare for their potential for innovative thinking.
It's not necessarily about like who's better, who's worse, but how do you think, these teams relate to just any observations that you might have?
Yeah, how would you compare them? What would you?
Yeah, I think we've got some coming in now. Yeah. So Team B has a wider range of perspectives. Mm-hmm. Oh man, now they're coming in fast and furious. So Jessica, if you want to take some, and I'll take some.
So somebody pointed out the difference between them, that Team A, all the ideas would be the same, but Team B would be really difficult to communicate. Most people are predicting, of course, that Team B would have more diverse ideas. So maybe more innovative thinking.
Right.
Team B would be more potential, but might only if moderated well.
Excellent observation, whoever said that.
Right. Team A is monocultural. Team B is multicultural.
Oh, I like that term. Thank you. How about one more?
Different range of problems and experiences in Team B. Right. Because of the backgrounds as well as what everybody's bringing into the room.
Yeah, different range of experiences. That's great. Well, so, that's our premise. We wouldn't be here today if we didn't have that premise. Team A might be a little more easy to work in. Somebody said that, and it's true. But Team B will more likely produce those innovative results, those diverse perspectives, those unique views, right? This is not just opinion. Alvin's now going to share with us some research that supports our observations. Alvin?
Bruce, thanks, and welcome to everyone. Many of you on this webinar work in a space where you need numbers to make the business case for diversity and how this impacts your bottom line. We're sharing some real numbers here this afternoon. Boston Consulting Group, Harvard Business Review, some well-noted and respected resources. Our first box of research suggests that businesses run with culturally diverse leadership teams are more likely to develop new markets, new products in this day and age. No surprise in the second box, companies with more women were more likely to introduce radical new innovations into the market over a 2-year period. And again, no surprise here, firms with greater diversity are 45% likelier to grow market share over the previous year and 70% likelier to capture a new market. And lastly, firms with more ethnic and racial diversity in their management are 35% more likely to have returns above their industry means. And lastly, innovation piece, 2 times innovation revenue versus companies with below average diversity in their management. And in real time, you may or may not have seen it yesterday. Spent a lot of my life in New Jersey. Johnson & Johnson, one of the preeminent pharmaceutical firms in the world, has committed to increase their diversity and Black manager population by 50% over the next 5 years. So it's not just that we view these teams differently, we view really the outcomes differently, and that really gets us to the initial poll. So how and why are diverse teams more innovative? Remembering Team B from Bruce, diverse teams not only look different, but they act and perform differently. And so as we walk through our findings, again, coming back to some of the challenges in the poll, broader diverse teams seem to have a better understanding of problem and opportunity identification. Greater range, looking kind of under the surface, correlates with the development of potential solutions, outcomes, and more creative solutions. Thirdly, smarter is the development of narrowing down, having a criteria for a solution for making decisions. And lastly, richer insights. The notion of diverse teams do see implementation differently, different perspective, and how to best implement and sustain innovative solutions. With this said, we're not naive. We understand there's some challenges here, and Natalie is going to walk you through some of those.
Thanks so much, Alvin.
Alvin, thank you. As Alvin said, I want to draw attention. Alvin made reference to the poll results. One of your biggest challenges is knowing what the right problems are to solve or the best opportunities. And look, diverse teams are going to be better at that because of those diverse views that you observed. And also execution, you mentioned, was a significant challenge. And if you have more people and maybe a broader understanding of the organization and the ins and outs and pitfalls, they'll be able to have a deeper understanding of how to implement. So Alvin, thank you for pointing that out. And Natalie, I know you're going to pull this together.
I will try, Bruce. I think, let's talk about diversity. Alvin just went through some great evidence about diversity's impact on innovation. So if we see diversity as this dynamic fuel that will really drive your innovation effort, then what is your organization doing about it? And, when we ask this question, it's kind of a rhetorical question right now, but think about that. Think about the different things that you're doing within your organization to leverage diversity for greater innovation. So as you think about that, we're going to launch a poll, and on a scale from 1 to 10, how effective is your organization at leveraging diversity for innovative thinking? Go with your gut feel. Jessica's launched the poll here. So go ahead, your best guess. How effective would you say your organization is leveraging diversity for innovative thinking? Okay, looks like things are coming in. They're kind of all over the place at this moment. So that's interesting. That's nice. Let's see. Go ahead and
like we have the full range here from every side, basically.
Yeah, it looks like the highest one is a 7. We have some not effective at all, some up to 8. Somebody says here, diversity is definitely a problem.
Definitely important. And we have professionalism. However, we have to be careful about cloning diverse groups into being like the non-diverse body of thought, process, and ideas and insights. Yeah, that's a good comment.
Good point.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me
share the results here of the poll so we can see where most people are. We did have a few 9s and 10s, and I'm happy to see that 7 is the main answer. But then you've got it distributed all over 1 through 10.
If you look at 3, 4, and 5 together, you're looking at about 40 to almost 50%, right?
Right.
That category.
So yes, definitely interesting, that wide range that we had on the poll. And, one of the challenges I think for folks is, why is it so hard? And some of it is diversity is categorized together as one level. And actually, there are 3 types of diversity that can help you really look at those different dimensions of how to leverage it well. And so the first one that we're noticing here is personal. And personal is, color, gender identification, age, those types of personal diversity. Another type is role diversity. So this is functional areas within the organization, IT, marketing, human resources, and so on. And then also your level within the organization, senior leaders, mid-manager, line employee. Those are different types of diversity. And then a third one is cognitive diversity. And this may be somewhat new to some of you. And for others, you're like, yes, cognitive diversity. And this is really like different approaches to problem solving. Are you people who really focus on clarifying, getting in the research and the data? Are you really into creating new ideas, ideation, or really working ideas and developing them out? Or are you really quick to action? Let's just try something and see how it works out. And cognitive diversity is something that I think is a dimension that can be leveraged more effectively, especially when it comes to instantaneously increasing your diversity of a team. As a participant of this webinar today, we are going to offer a free foresight assessment, which will give you your personal style preferences. And that will be in the follow-up email that Jessica will send out. And so if you're curious about what is my approach, what is my cognitive style, we're going to make that available for you with our compliments and compliments of foresight. A key point here is that everyone and every type of diversity brings a unique combination of experience, skills, knowledge, and roles. And with our radical inclusion certification, if you want to add even more depth to these 3 different types, we have a tool called the Diversity Circle that we provide to facilitators that go through our program. But right now, you can start leveraging these 3 different types to really scan for all the different levels of diversity you have available to you. Now, many of you may be like a client that we have that said, we're understanding we've got great role diversity. And now that we understand cognitive diversity, we do have that as well. But we don't have a lot when it comes to personal diversity. So what can we do about that? And so what we're going to try to help you with that in partnership with some of our retention and recruitment experts, we have created a job aid. And this is a job aid that you can share with your human resources leaders, the diversity and inclusion leaders, retention and recruitment experts at your organization, and give them some proven tips on how to expand the workforce diversity of your organization. We're happy to share this with you freely. You can email me at natalie@changereadysolutions.com and we'll get that to you. Also, Jessica will have that information available in the follow-up email, and you can ask for it that way as well. But if this is like a burning need, email me right now and we'll get it to you right after the webinar. And so, Bruce, we've talked about ways to increase your diversity. So increasing your diversity, what do you think? Is that going to get us the greater innovative thinking that we're shooting for?
Well, so that's sort of the premise we're talking about, right, Natalie? But the answer is not necessarily. So let's take a look at somebody we have a lot of respect for to get a hint of what that means. So Nissan Sage, a great Black filmmaker. She's made a number of movies, some of which you may have seen, like Belle. And Nissan says, more attention also must be paid to what happens once people of color are hired. A lot of times they want our physical presence, but not our voice. Now that's interesting, right? And I can think of some world-class organizations that have done a lot to try and recruit people of color, but then they can't keep them. And maybe this is part of a hint of what's going on there. So we call what Misan is referring to the social climate of your group discussions, whether they're virtual or whether they're live, whether they're synchronous or asynchronous, right? There's a dynamic that takes place among those people, right? So here's an example. what does it feel like to be the only Black person in a room? Or what does it feel like to be the only woman in a room? Or just fill in the blank. What does it feel like to be the only X in a room? That defines some of the challenges around social climate. Here's another example that many of us may have experienced personally. So I'm going to share YouTube, and just in case you can't hear the executive at the beginning of this short meeting, he starts off by saying, team, I need your ideas on how to cut costs. What are they? So let's take a look at this very short clip.
So I'm gonna give everybody an overview. It's a boardroom full of people looking for new ideas to cut costs, and one of the seemingly lesser, highly ranked people in the office says, let's cut costs by saving 10% on FedEx Express shipping. And then, of course, the boss at the front of the room says, you know what? I have an idea. Let's cut costs by using FedEx Express shipping. And he points out that he said the exact same thing as the other guy, but it's showing some of the problem of what we call the hippo problem, paying attention to the highest paid person's opinion at the exclusion of others.
Thank you for that audio description of the video that didn't play. Some of you may remember that commercial from years ago. But it's not uncommon, right? To be expressing your opinion, trying to voice your views, but they're not heard or not respected for a number of reasons, right? And so what we have found is that social climate is the key determinant that will influence how openly people are about sharing their perspectives, especially diverse and maybe even unpopular perspectives. So Alvin's going to lead us through a chat with some great examples that he has to understand a little bit more about this issue of voice and social climate. Alvin.
Bruce, Jessica, thank you. So I want to set this chat up. So we've all certainly learned from our successes and misses leading innovative teams in our various organizations. Certainly our positive bias with your time today is that we sometimes miss the people component, the diversity value. And we know the science backs this up. Our brains, our neural pathways will automatically categorize people almost to the extent of stereotyping. We put them in boxes, and as we try to do in the video, we place them on the shelf until the hippo, as Jessica says almost exactly the same thing. In Change-Ready Solutions, we define this as boxing and shelving. We believe it limits the view of people on a team and their value and their ability to contribute. And since these thoughts about others cause us to send unconscious signals, we've been talking about this for the last few years, implicit bias, boxing and shelving also alters their behavior, the way that they view themselves and their value to the team. So another way to think about this is, unfortunately, given the pandemic, but pre that, if you've been in a hospital, our brains tend to tell us that the female is the nurse and the male is the doctor, even though we have no science to back that up. Again, pre-pandemic, when all of us were traveling, we would probably look to the left into the cockpit, and every now and then we were surprised when we saw the female pilot in the first chair. So for this last chat, what we want you to simply delve into is over the past month, if you're willing to share in group discussions you've had either virtually or in person, might you or might anyone, including you, felt boxed or shelved? Give us that example and that impact, and giving time, we'll maybe call a few out. So please begin.
We actually had someone share something even before we shared the video too, about being the only woman in the room and how she felt like she doesn't belong here. And her work was praised by some and criticized immediately by others, and they wouldn't even allow her to finish her presentation.
Yep.
Oh boy. It's a great example, and thank you. I'm sorry you went through that experience, but the word belong is a key indicator, right, of the emotional impact on us, right?
And someone else is saying happens all the time. So again, we're not prepared to tell you that we have the magic wand, but it is the notion about giving you additional tools to put into your toolkit when we're doing this innovative work. Someone else says, I can definitely identify by being bitten by the hippo. Thank you, Jessica. So our transition on this is the creative process as robust tools for producing diverse ideas, but not necessarily for ensuring that diverse people's contributions are also valued. So with that, Natalie's going to share some additional information. Natalie.
Yeah. So, this is hard stuff. And, what we've identified as top 3 challenge areas are things that we've normalized. And we need to recognize them so that we can shift to change them. And so the first broad category is really what we label as voice. So it's the dominating, higher ranking participants, like the FedEx video that you couldn't see, but Jessica did a great job of explaining to us all. We've all seen that happen, right? And also just, I think somebody shared in the chat too about being a logical thinker, also introverted participants, just closing down, not sharing. People saying if they had something to share, they would say it. Another area is boxing and shelving. And that's really where the norms suppress divergent thinking. And an example of that early in my career, I was in a meeting and it was actually said when an older person offered up a suggestion in our idea perspective that someone in the room said, your perspective doesn't matter. You're a dinosaur. You're on the way out. And there were other people of the same age in that same meeting, and the energy in the room, it was just like it was sucked out. But then other people felt like elevated. And it was just a terrible dynamic to see that happen. And that type of thing happens in different ways all the time. And we need to stop normalizing it. The other one is like our excuse of the day, pressure as a category. Oh gosh, we got to move faster. Like Bruce shared, like things are getting more complex. The rate of change is changing. We're running so fast that is giving us excuses. We don't have time to include more diversity. It's going to slow us down. And they sound logical, but they're actually undermining our performance. And so we need to recognize those challenge areas so that we can do something about it. One of the ways to begin to shift from that is really looking at how to apply what we call the DE&I equation. And the DE&I equation is really helping to implant in our brains and in our organizations that we need to have this formula to get us to the equal sign. So diversity, those 3 types of diversity that we talked about earlier, classes, roles, cognitive styles, all of that. We need to really be paying attention to that mix of diversity. And then add to it equity. And this is really what Masan Sagan was talking about, that once you have diverse people there, that they feel like they have a voice, that they're valued, and that they belong, they have a seat at the table. And the multiplier here is really inclusion, that when there are tricky problems to solve, when there's a need for innovative solutions, that we don't let the time pressure get in our way of really being inclusive, including those voices, so that we can get to that innovative thinking that's going to improve those outcomes. And those business performance outcomes that Alvin talked about before, they go across the individual level, the team level, and the organization. And really the key to making this work, when Bruce was talking about setting the stage for the social climate, is that you have to facilitate through inclusive interchange so that you can do this well. And these are tool sets, in my experience in 20 plus years in the innovation field, we don't really have those people inclusive interchange types of tool sets. And so it's been something that I think we need and that will help us level up our game. And so, Bruce, I know that you've got some things that you can add to this. What more would you say about inclusive interchange?
Well, thank you, Natalie. This formula that you see on the page is a great concept formula, right? It lets us know where our energy should be focused. But how do you translate this into actions that you can take tomorrow, right? That's what we hear from many of our clients, which is I buy the premise that more diverse people lead to more innovative solutions. But what do I do about it, right? And so for us, part of it is what we call the inclusive interchange. And one of you did say earlier on in your chat comments about the difference between Team A and Team B. It's all about how it's managed. Kudos to you. That's right. So taking that formula as the root of what we call the inclusive interchange, it means actually interacting with people, facilitating and leading your discussions synchronously or asynchronously, virtually or real time, face-to-face, facilitating it so the social climate is one that everyone is respected but feels respected, that individual differences are actually prized as opposed to minimized. And when you do this, people co-create innovative solutions in ways that never could have been done with that homogeneous group. Now, how do you make this happen? Well, there are some skills that are required to facilitate an inclusive interchange like this. So this is not all the skills. These are just sort of categories of skills. So the first is connection skills. These are skills that ensure that people are really listening to each other. And I'm on a board of directors of a number of organizations. And in one organization, somebody just last night at a board meeting was saying, we really should do this to be able to bring in more revenue to our nonprofit. And before the person even finished, right, they were stopped and saying, we've done that before. It doesn't work. That's not deep listening. That's listening with prejudice and listening with predisposed ideas about things. That doesn't lead to inclusive interchange. So how do you manage that? And facilitating a deeper understanding of each other's points. Many times, particularly in the innovative process, right? People share an idea that's not well thought out yet. It's just sort of emerging, and they won't be articulate about it, and not everyone in the room will understand what they're saying. But the inclusive interchange requires the facilitation of understanding each other's points, of deeper grasping of the essence of what people are saying. Another set of skills are value-related skills, making sure that everyone in the room has an equally valued voice, regardless of what category they're in and regardless of rank. Not easy. Also, that the facilitator is enhancing the dignity of each person and the value of their unique perspectives. Right? And lastly, what we call divergent skills, to create a safe space, not just for creative thinking, because I think most innovation managers we know do that, but creating a safe space for diverse people to express diverse views. That goes to the quote that Alvin read a couple of minutes ago. And also to enable people that it's a safe enough space that they could tap into their own deep thinking and deep experiences to be express them openly without fear, right, of self-criticism or criticism from others. Right? So what are the outcomes when a facilitator leads groups this way? Well, one is you definitely get that greater innovative thinking. It happens. And also, people feel more positive about participating in this process. They're looking forward to it because it's a place where they know they belong, right? As someone said earlier. Now, we have a confession to make. That this approach is not just about a great way of building more innovative thinking for all four phases of innovation, right? Identifying the problem, developing solutions, narrowing the solution, and executing the solution. That this approach, if you actually innovate and solve problems this way, you are creating an inclusive and equitable workplace right there on the spot, one interaction at a time. It doesn't need an executive mandate. It doesn't need a program. This is about changing the way you do business that builds this more inclusive and respectful workplace. So, what are some takeaways that we're hoping that you can get from this time that we've spent together? Number one, manage the social climate of your synchronous and asynchronous and virtual and live interactions, right? Manage it by laying out some ground rules about how you expect people to interact with each other. For those people who facilitate, it's going to make it a lot easier. So whether you are the person who's facilitating or you manage others who facilitate, this is one step that can help them be able to be more effective, inclusive facilitators of innovative thinking. Number two, assess your group makeup. We've been talking about diversity, right? Natalie revealed the secret that there is not one type of diversity, but multiple types, right? So take advantage of that to optimize the mix so your groups are more diverse, either by personal diversity or role diversity or the way people think. And number three, conduct a health check. After you have these interactions, check back with people and say, hey, how was it for you? Did you feel able and ready to openly express your point of view, to express disagreement, or as Jess says, the hippo, right? To disagree with the hippo. Do that check and it'll give you a sense of what you may need to do a little differently moving forward. So one of the things that we love about our work with IdeaScale is that they have tools that actually can support this process. So Jessica, would you like to tell us about that?
Yes, of course. Thank you. It's nice. One of the reasons that Change Ready Solutions and IdeaScale started working together is because we found that the technology is actually a great way to underpin the DEI framework and to facilitate inclusive interchange. That is, of course, if you're taking those actions that Bruce, Natalie, and Alvin have already talked about in terms of how you're training your moderators, the terms that you lay out when you're launching an IdeaScale crowdsourcing challenge. Because IdeaScale's technology allows you to crowdsource ideas from anywhere and organize them, even in large groups, we found it's helped companies that have wanted to level up the amount of diversity that they are involving in their innovative processes. And it really underpins all parts of it. So when it comes to equity, it's about making sure that all the voices are treated the same. We've seen that there are several key features that we have that correct for some of those intrinsic biases or help us. For example, we were working with the US Coast Guard, and they identified a problem that they weren't recruiting enough female talent into their leadership ranks. And if they didn't do something soon, by the year 2030, they weren't going to have any female leaders. But they actually decided to address that problem by crowdsourcing solutions from their employees. But in order to make such a subject that could be, potentially incendiary or controversial, they decided to make all of the submissions anonymous for that challenge so that anybody, no matter their rank, their own personal identity, they wouldn't be boxed and shelved because of the suggestions that they had made. And they used many of those suggestions to change their recruiting and workplace environment so that they could solve this problem of recruiting female leadership. And I think actually technology is most powerful for the inclusion aspect of the DEI equation, because when you're using technology to involve people in the innovation process, you're much more likely to get a variety of voices involved than you have to do this all in one room. For example, one of our customers is the NYU Administrative Management Council, and they have over 4,000 admins in 25 different countries, and they want to involve all those voices in driving their decision-making and their policy. So they've always had the opportunity for anyone to attend these monthly meetings where they could share their feedback. Which is a great instinct. But when they introduced IdeaScale as an addition to that, they found that they got so much more information. And that the best part, they said, was that they heard from so many voices that they hadn't heard from before. People who couldn't make that meeting because they were taking care of children or weren't comfortable standing in front of a room full of people and holding up a mic to share their ideas. So they said that the level of participation and diversity has been transformative for them. And it's for that reason, because we know that all of you attending today are really interested in empowering your organization to get this level of diverse thought and inclusive thinking, we're offering 20% off to anybody on their first year of their subscription to IdeaScale to hopefully help you make it easier for programs like this in your company.
Thank you so much, Jessica. And Natalie is going to take some minutes to tell you something important, which is, what's the checklist? If you really want to implement something like this, what's the checklist? So Natalie.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jessica. And I think, technology is so essential today because of the rapid change that's going on that Bruce was talking about earlier. And so it gives, rocket fuel to these efforts. And I think it's essential. You need a technology. As far as, what are things that you should be doing to really build out your ecosystem for radical inclusion and activate that, certify a cadre of skilled radical inclusion facilitators. Now, this can be add-on to design thinking. This can be add-on to Agile, other processes. It's really filling that radical inclusion, skill set, tool set, mindset that can go along with that. And why that's so important is you're solving real problems, you're looking for key opportunities, and it's tied to a result. And so that's very key for organizations. Also, another key area is managers. Really develop managers to cultivate inclusive interchange at the team level, the teams that they're leading, how they're facilitating their daily interactions. And then also as innovators and innovative managers leading these, we all know that it's so much easier to get engagement and have people to step into the innovation process if they have some basic skills and some common language. And so train the team members to interact with each other and support inclusive interchange, and it'll be baked into what you do. And then, of course, also for the executive leadership, use an accelerator to align senior leaderships so that they are operating in an inclusive way and not unintentionally doing anything that undermine the efforts. And depending on your organization, where you start, how you start is dynamic. It's really assessing where you are and where you need to get started. So that's, the key things that you should be thinking about as far as building the ecosystem. And I think, Bruce, you have some, but wait, there's more. As a participant of this webinar, we are offering 10% off of our facilitator certification and our in-house training. We do have an open enrollment virtual certification coming up in mid-December. There's a break for the holiday, and then it will continue on into the 2021. And if you're an IdeaScale client already, you'll get an additional 5% off of that offer. And so, Bruce, with that, go ahead and give us some magic.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Natalie. I don't know about that, but I have a story to tell. If you haven't heard this story, it's a wonderful story. It applies to many things, but it certainly applies to leveraging diversity for greater innovative thinking. And it's an ancient parable. And it's the parable of Ali Hafed. So Ali was a farmer, and he had a lot of land, but he was disgusted with his land. There were a lot of rocks, as you might see in this picture, and he had a hard time cultivating the land. So he was just lamenting his situation. And one day some travelers came through, and he saw them at the local place of gathering, and they started talking about diamonds. They were diamond hunters, and he became enthralled with the thought of diamonds and finding them. So he ended up selling his farm to someone else, took the money, and spent the rest of his life traveling throughout Europe and the Middle East looking for some diamond mine that he can buy. And he never found it. He never found it. He died an unhappy and unfulfilled man. But now let's shift to the fellow that he sold the land to. So this fellow was quite interested in the land. He said, these rocks look quite interesting to me. So he took some of the rocks and brought them into town to have some expert look at them. And the expert looked at the rocks, looked at him and says, "Sir, these are not rocks. These are all large uncut diamonds." And so the story is called Acres of Diamonds. We could look around outside for some unique thinking, and we can hope that we find it somewhere else, but we know within your own organizations, especially if you increase your diversity, you have those acres of diamonds. You have those gems of innovative thinking and solutions that can move your organization to a whole new level. So we wanted to thank you, and I'm going to turn it back over to Jessica, who's going to facilitate a Q&A.
Right. So thank you, all of you, for those who are interested in sticking around and asking some questions. We're happy to provide some answers for the remainder of the hour here. One of the questions that came in is just a simple question is, will the presentation PowerPoint be available after the event? We are going to make a version of these slides available in addition to the recording, so I'll answer that one right away. But for the rest of you, if you have other questions, go ahead and either put them in the Q&A little widget down there at the bottom of the Zoom screen, or feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll ask them, and Bruce, Alvin, and Natalie can answer them. One of the questions that has come in is, can you please explain more about the thinking behind the actual equation for DEI, D plus E times inclusivity equals innovative thinking, as opposed to D plus E plus I or D times E times I? He's just curious about the declaration is that one is more multiplier than the others.
Great question. And of course, we went through all of those different combinations as we were developing it out and doing our research, right, Bruce? And we looked at what seemed to have the most evidence around being the multiplier. And that's where we landed with inclusion as the multiplier, because it's really having that inclusion where it opens it up, it cracks it open. In a different way than having more diverse people that aren't included, don't have equity, so that they aren't included in the way. And so that's really why we landed on inclusion being the multiplier. And what more would you say, Bruce?
No, that's very well said, Natalie. You can have diversity, that's great. People can feel respected, that's great. But if you don't involve them in your innovative processes and problem-solving processes, your design thinking, your agile thinking, if you don't involve them, you don't get the benefit. So yes, it's not just additive, it's a multiplier.
We had another person asking about kind of the dynamic that exists between somebody who's maybe expressing different thoughts about how does this configure with the leader or an employer that feels that you are not a good fit or not a team player if you have questions that specifically address concerns about the process. Whatever that process may be.
Yeah, let me chime in on that one as the human resources person. I think I tried to say it pretty quickly in the chat. This is complicated, right? And so I think the question I would always have about team player is, what are the values of the organization? Is team player a tagline for something else going on? So again, I think I'd go back to the comments that Bruce and Natalie have made throughout the afternoon, which is having guidelines for not just how the teams operate, but how does the organization operate.
I have found that sometimes, can't promise it always works, but sometimes having a conversation with that manager in a calm setting, when the manager's in the good mood, right, doesn't feel threatened by you, to explain my disagreeing with some of your thinking is my way of showing my greatest respect for you. Because I believe that you don't want a team of yes men and yes women. You want a team of people who own our challenges as much as you do. And so when I express thoughts that are different than yours, it really is my statement of support for you. But if you have a more constructive way that I can say it, because I never mean to offend, please let me know that too. And I'd say you got a 50-50 shot of opening up some new doors in that relationship.
Well, I'm looking at our Q&A right now. Didn't Peter Drucker address this subject almost 40 years ago in his books on management and the effective executive?
Peter Drucker knew everything. Now, some of you
So to answer this seriously, the answer is yes. But Bruce and Natalie and I talk all the time about, we also figured out Kaizen and Six Sigma 30 or 40 years ago, and we still put out products that aren't quality driven. The human brain has the capacity to learn, and it also has the capacity to make the same stupid mistakes over and over again. Sorry.
I'm just going to add to what Alvin said. Peter Drucker, we think, was brilliant. If you may not know who that name is, right, if you haven't been in the workforce for a while, get some of his stuff. Ignore the fact that it's sort of contextually dated from some decades ago. Really one of the most brilliant thinkers in all of leadership and management development. But what Alvin and Natalie and I try and do is to make it simple. Take Peter's brilliant ideas and to turn it into easy to use, practical solutions. So thank you.
We did have a question about the certification course itself. What's the time commitment and the scope of it? Can you do it while you're working full time?
Yeah, so it absolutely is doable while you're working. It might mean you have to protect some time on your calendar. And there are two different ways. So we have our open enrollment session coming up December 14th. It starts. And it's a total of 6 weeks time. We do take some break over the holiday time and then resume in mid-January. But it's, 3 to 4 hours per week for the most part. And, there's things where we come together as a team, and then things that you do on your own, things that you might do with a cohort group, because we're really working to build a large community of practice around this so that you're connected with the cohort group and can continue to learn from each other. But then we can also do one private session for your team or your organization where we can really work the schedule to best fit the team needs or your scheduling needs. So absolutely can be done.
Somebody was asking about, can sometimes our role diversity be associated with cognitive diversity as well?
I think I love the question. So if I might answer it, absolutely yes, right? So there is different ways of looking at cognitive diversity. Execution is one sort of cognitive style that says this is a person who's great at getting things done, right? So there are certain roles in an organization, certain jobs where getting it done is the bottom line, right? There are other cognitive styles where creative thinking and coming up with new ideas is perfect. And then there are other roles that are much more appropriate, right, that fit with that. So it's a wonderful insight, whoever asked it. And yes, there's not an absolute correlation. You could be effective in many roles with many styles, but there are some natural affinities.
There are. And, if you're really curious, send me an email. Foresight has done research on that. And they do have some reports that show where cognitive styles tend to line up and also in functional areas like senior leaders versus different line managers. So if you're really curious about that, there's a nice research report on that available.
What about, we have a question here about the implementation side of this. Can you speak more to how you all really have been able to achieve the implementation side of this, especially with the global workforce that presents additional complexity? I believe this person is speaking about their organization. They have a great foundation laid and has the right intentions, but often when push comes to shove, things get busy and do not advance. How do you genuinely push beyond that and change the bureaucratic inertia in an organization?
It's a wonderful question, and you who asked it, it's very practical, right? It's like, all right, how do we actually get things done? One of the other roles that I had the honor of having was a leader in the change management consulting area with IBM. So change management is not a simple little, make sure you're sending out memos or emails to people that they know what's going on. It's an art and science, right? And when we work with our clients who want particular help in that area, we pass along some change management strategies because inertia, you said it comes from not necessarily wanting to change or not seeing a need for a change or even being resistant to the change because the new world you're promoting may not be as appealing to me as what the world I'm in now. Mm-hmm. So when we, throughout the certification, those who get certified learn about some of the change management strategies that can take place when they're in the fourth phase of innovative thinking, which is around execution.
We had one other question here. Are there any other qualifications to take the course or the certification? I imagine like prerequisites or things that people should come to that with.
I would say, it's designed for facilitators. Right. And so, coming into it with basic facilitator platform skills would be really one of the key requisites because we're really focused on training facilitators to add in these new skills. Is there anything more that you would add to that, Bruce or Alvin?
Alvin, did you want to add something?
No, I would just say, this is not, level one novice stuff. This is someone who's had some experience in the space. Yeah. To Alvin's point, the facilitator certification does include a deep grounding in group facilitation skills, right? So, because we know that not all of us have those. So you don't have to feel like I'm a facilitation expert to have that. Right. It would help to have opportunity to facilitate innovative thinking discussions or problem-solving discussions or agile design thinking discussions. If you're not facilitating any of those now,
The question is, can you get a group together where you can do some of that and apply and practice what is learned in the facilitation? And then there's one other, I think, prerequisite. That's a passion for innovative thinking and a passion for creating an inclusive, respectful environment.
So I know we're up against the hour. Natalie, someone had a question. Any books to recommend on design thinking?
Oh, gee. None specifically. I mean, of course, anything from IDEO on design thinking, I think, is top notch. It's open source. And so there's a lot of different variations of design thinking. I would recommend, some of the creative problem solving books and also books by Edward de Bono, if you haven't read those, for some basics. But of course, anything, I would definitely suggest follow IDEO if you don't follow them now, because they share a lot openly on that.
And I would say, too, that we're willing to answer any questions you have after the presentation. We'll be sharing contact information, and feel free to reach out after the event's over today. So thank you very much, Bruce, Alvin, Natalie. Thank you, of course, to all of our attendees for taking the time. Thanks for those who stayed long. It was great to talk with you all today, and looking forward to hearing about the programs that you create.
Thank you. Thank you, Jessica.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.